Welcome to Malcolm and Simone Collins. You guys are pronatalists, kind of the poster couple, I suppose, for a movement which I discovered existed about 4 days ago when, yeah, we made contact. So I am on a fast track to learning about it, and I'm thrilled to have a conversation with you guys. Up front, at this stage, I'm not concerned about population collapse, but I am open minded and I'm willing to change my mind. I suppose if I hear a lot of interesting arguments. I assume you guys are open minded if I convince you of
Yeah.
my perspective. But then again, I think you guys have almost like an online presence and business surrounding this. So maybe that might be difficult for you to change your mind.
Yeah, we're a little far down the
Yeah,
pipeline at this
yeah.
point but
Just put the children back inside Simone, Malcolm.
put
How
the
difficult can
children.
that be?
Yeah,
Undo.
we'll go for like a 40th trimester abortion. Well, actually, speaking of, we were talking about this before the call, and I was like, today's a big day for us because we have NBC coming over to our house, which in the US is like a major news network. And then after that, we have CPS, which in the US is Child Protective Services. And we've had these people online where, because we went trending, we had this big feature piece in The Guardian on us last weekend. A bunch of people are like, we will not stop until we take your children away. And
Yeah, I can read you one of
is,
the tweets. I have one right in front of me.
oh, go for it. Yeah.
Yes, Jane Smith says, "You are disgusting child abusers, and I will not stop until your kids are taken away from you. Your actions and thought processes arising from whatever happened to you in your childhoods needs to be addressed by intensive and immediate therapy."
Okay, why? Sorry, I'm catching up. Why are people frustrated with you? Like,
okay, so there's this group of people in the world that's perspectives on the world's problems and scientific consensus was like developed in the 90s, and they just refused to update it. You know, the world's population is exploding. It was exploding in the 90s, so it must be exploding now. And I'm like, no, you know, you can look at even like in Latin America, the fertility is collapsing at incredible rates. Like they collectively, even by the UN's own reporting standards, Latin America fell below repopulation rate all the way back in 2019 collectively. You know, and right now, you know, local demographers, the piece for people who are interested in this that I'd recommend is in America's Quarterly, and it's titled "Latin America's Fertility Decline is Accelerating and No One Knows Why." Demographers in the region are beginning to use the word vertiginous to describe how quickly. I believe one of the stats was like here's a shocking one. So and if you look up like the Statistica models, like the aggregate models of fertility rates, you won't find these. You need to go to the local demographers because the aggregate models are actually based on predicted fertility rates in the past, not the actual measured fertility rates today. So it doesn't take into account this rapid decline we've seen. And a number of countries in Latin America have actually already fallen to around the 1.3 number that we thought was only possible in countries like Europe. That means they're basically halving their population every generation.
well, let me jump in there because I'm not going to dispute the data that the population is declining. I want to jump to something far juicier, which is okay, it's declining. Why is this a problem? Like, you know, like what's the
okay?
Yeah.
I want to get to that in a second, but I wanted to get to the second point here, which is why they want to take our kids from us. So this is one category that they don't like that we're talking about fertility collapse. The other category is they're just behind in their views on things like the correct parental practices. So one thing that really exploded with us is our kid almost kicked over a table at a restaurant. So I lightly slapped him in the face and then told him, I love you, but you know, you need to, you know, light immediate corporal punishment. This we now know from the research. There was this large meta study called Parental Punishment, Don't Throw the Baby Out with the Bathwater, that came out in 2023 that basically showed that the old studies that tried to show that corporal punishment was bad, well, they had giant data sets. They were conducted very poorly. So they did things like, in our family, we don't do any corporal punishments with our daughter because she doesn't need it. Like she doesn't act up. So they would have put her in the non-punishment category, and they would have put our boys in the punishment category, and then said, see, punishment is causing bad behavior. And it's like, obviously that's a stupid way. When you correct for this, it turns out that it has a slightly positive effect or a neutral effect. And so we're just trying to base what we're doing on you know, what makes sense in animal models, what makes sense in the research today, but they're behind in the research, so they categorize that as like abuse, right? So that is what happened there. But to your question,
of why is this a problem? One, a big misconception about pronatalism is that pronatalists want there to be endless growth in human population. Totally not the case. We are fine, even if like the population is significantly smaller than it is now. Fine, like honestly, we're pretty agnostic to that. And you know, if human flourishing is hampered by a much larger population, let's, you know, keep that in check. However, what the primary goal of pronatalism is now is raising awareness about a hard landing on demographic collapse. That is to say that it's inevitable. Like Malcolm says, the Titanic's going to hit the iceberg. We can't turn around this ship now. It's going to happen, kind of like with climate change. It's going to happen. We need to plan for it to minimize suffering, deaths, because this is going to affect, just like with climate change, the most vulnerable economically in society. When it happens. Why? Because basically our economies, governments, infrastructure, pretty much everything that's kind of been built on a systemic bureaucratic level is built on the assumption of population growth, that, you know, our pensions and our tax systems are built on this, and the fact that we have not planned for the fact that there will be fewer humans in the future paying into pension funds, paying taxes, means that we are going to see crumbling city infrastructure, shrinking economies, pension funds that no longer work, and destabilized governments. We need to plan for that. Now, we can have systems that don't require infinite human growth. That's fine. But we don't right now. Right now, all governments are doing is using a lot of misguided attempts to just keep their populations growing, which aren't working anyway. And we can get into that if you want. And what we're going to end up with is increasingly draconian attempts to make populations grow, like we're already seeing in China, where they're curtailing access to reproductive choice, abortions, birth control, even vasectomies. So basically, we're trying to avoid the entrance of a Handmaid's Tale into mainstream governance. We're also trying to avoid cultural mass extinction. Now, a lot of people, when they hear about pronatalism, they think, oh, this is some kind of racist great replacement theory thing, or this is some kind of like fundamental religious anti-abortion thing. And yes, there are groups that call themselves pronatalists that are that, but really they're just religious groups that are against abortion. They're practicing their religion, or they're racist groups that are practicing racism. They don't actually support pronatalism because they don't actually support policies that encourage pronatalism. Actually, things like banning abortions don't encourage birth rates to go up. So that's an agnostic issue when it comes to pronatalism. And quite frankly, white groups are not those who are most vulnerable to extinction in the face of falling fertility rates. The groups that are most vulnerable right now, South Koreans, Emiratis, Jains, Native Americans. These are not white Christian groups. This is not Western civilization collapsing. So the people talking about great replacement theory are a little bit delusional. Okay, a lot delusional. And this is a big problem for our movement because people are not engaging with it, making all these assumptions. They're saying, oh, you're taking away our reproductive rights. So for example, I think it was in the Netherlands recently, a bunch of protesters, in response to some discussion of pronatalist policies being implemented, lined up in this big protest wearing Handmaid's Tale cosplay. I don't know if it's like some kind of fetish thing for them. They just wanted to put it on and they're like, this is my excuse to do it. But they're just completely misconstruing the movement, which is very frustrating for us because we as advocates are trying to get out there and be like, hey guys, maybe we should do something about this. And they're like, racist child abusers, how could you?
Right.
So to break this down, there's three core reasons we need to be concerned. The first, to what Simone was talking about at the end there, is if things continue the way we're going now, we will end up in a Handmaid's Tale situation. If it turns out that every cultural group that gives women the right to choose to have kids is unable to motivate above repopulation fertility rates, then those cultural groups won't exist in the future, and we will live in a future where only the groups that restricted women's rights exist. And you see this across all sorts of metrics. Like, if all of the groups that care about the environment don't have above repopulation fertility rates, then they cease to exist in the future. And this creates a societal problem because right now the dominant cultural group in our society, what we call the urban monoculture, is a very, very low fertility rate cultural group that can only survive by converting children from demographically healthy cultural groups. Well, this creates really negative selective pressures because it specializes at converting the most economically productive and the most open-minded of those groups. If intergenerationally from these high fertility groups, you're removing everybody who is open to outside ideas, you are removing everybody who treats, people outside of their group with charity, then these groups are going to become more aggressive and less open to outsiders over time. Then the second core pillar of pronatalism, as Simone mentioned, is the collapse of human diversity. This is human cultural and ethnic diversity. And where we're going to see the collapse happen most is in East Asia. Where we are going to see it happen least is in conservative, white, like Christian and Jewish groups. These groups are typically fine in the face of prosperity-induced fertility collapse. The final problem, which is not a small problem at all, is the collapse of the global economic system, which was designed with the assumption of constant growth. And if it enters a state in which the number of producers and consumers is declining instead of growing exponentially, it is very likely to, well, basically collapse as we understand it, which will lead to the slow and avoidable death of millions of people. So those are the three core problems.
Okay. So I want to dig into almost all of this stuff. I want to dig into corporate punishment. I want to dig into the economic collapse, the role of cultures, dealer's choice. Which one would you like to go into first?
Oh gosh, any of them, any that you think is interesting.
Okay, let's talk first. This is a simple question. So if our current structures are not designed to not have an exponentially growing human population of taxpayers and consumers, why then is the focus on having more babies to try and prop up a system which seems to be kind of flawed at its core? Why isn't the focus on reforming the system to better reflect how things are going to be in the future?
I mean, we've written books on. I wrote a book that topped the Wall Street Journal bestseller list called "The Pragmatist Guide to Governance," which focuses on these exact questions. We're not just trying to have a lot of kids; we are trying to birth the culture that comes after this current culture. We see the pronatalist movement as very much like a beacon that is designed to call the people who are willing to participate in the future, a pluralistic future of human civilization. Some people only want people like them to exist. They are not pronatalists, they are like pro-white or pro whatever, pro, Catholic, we are for the people who want a pluralistic alliance to come out of the end of this. And in this community, like the pronatalist community, one of the things we're regularly talking about is alternate economic systems, alternate governance structures, alternate cultural systems. But Simone, you had something you wanted to say to this.
Yeah, our point is we don't actually think that that's the smartest thing for governments to do. I think they're doing it because they're myopic and they're like, well, we couldn't possibly change the way we operate. So I guess we're just going to have to strong arm our people into keeping everything the way it is. And there are not very many incentives for governments to think on a long-term time frame. So fundamentally changing something as big as the economy. I mean, first off, just think about practically speaking, you're an elected politician. You have some influence over policy. Where do you even start? Like no one right now, based on the typical length of a term and based on their ability as an individual politician to do anything, is functionally going to be able to fundamentally change the way that pension systems and social security and social services and infrastructure are paid for and handled. Also consider where people are right now with currency values and national debt. Like people are having trouble paying for things right now as it is. Imagine how insensitive you'd be framed as a politician to be like, let's not worry about that right now as much as we should be worried about the future. Everything about politics right now and for the past long time has been focused on very short-term issues.
And this is why the pronatalist movement is such an optimistic movement, because we very much see this as all of the economically active players in the globe right now, or the majority, like the more economically active you are, the more likely you are to be mimetically sterilized, so the less likely you are to be playing a role in the future of human civilization.
Sorry, there was a word there I didn't understand. What type of sterilized were you? Did you say pneumatically?
Mimetically sterilized. Mimetically, like they're mimetic cluster. Okay, mimetics are like the study of how ideas spread, and you can get sort of mimetic clusters where you'll have
jokes on the internet. So so you're talking about a cultural group that has a similar value system, beliefs, and all that.
Yeah, but it is also broadly antinatalist. So when you're raised in mainstream culture, like in sort of every major city, every major urban educated community, there's going to be either a culture of antinatalism, meaning that people actually don't think it would be terrible if there weren't humans on the earth in the future, because humans are kind of a net drain, life is suffering, it's kind of immoral to bring children into the world, et cetera. So that's a very common and growing sentiment right now. And then on the other hand, even those who do want to have kids in this culture have such out of whack standards and understandings of what you need in terms of both lifestyle inflation in general, personally, but also what kids need in order to be raised. There's this some people frame it as like Ivy League preschool syndrome, where kids are just raised in incredibly expensive ways that they don't need to be raised in, where they're like, dude, I want to have
So
kids, but how
true,
could I
yeah.
possibly afford to have
Yeah.
kids? So that's what
They
we
think
mean
that's the
is when you're
bare
raised in this
minimum
culture.
is that you've got to have like artisanal, like handcrafted crayons and shit.
Yes, and your
Yeah,
child
like
is
if
eating,
you look behind me,
gluten-free.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
if
We
you look
just
behind me
watched
in
the
this
We
shot, we have
Crashed show. I don't know if you've seen that with the WeWork people. They started a school where the tuition was
Yes.
like 40 grand a year, and yeah, it was great.
And no
Sorry.
one questions that.
so
They're
if you
just like, oh,
look
well, that's
behind me,
actually a pretty good deal, you know?
if you look behind me, you can see our kids' beds that are stacked here in the back room of my office. You know, we use it counter-cyclically because the kids aren't here during the day. And this was one of the arguments that a lot of people used as to why our kids should be taken away, because we didn't have them sleep in separate rooms. And it's like, what sort of billionaire can afford a separate room for every one of their kids if you have a large family? And to sort of capstone this conversation, because of the existing system is going to collapse, you know, we could look at the existing economic and global political system's inevitable collapse due to like the fertility rate issue, and we could be all gloom and doom about it, or we could say, oh, this is a great opportunity to build something new. And like, what qualifies a person to be part of the conversation about what comes next? Well, it's undergoing the sacrifice of producing the next population. Although I will say that a lot of pronatalists, like at the pronatalist conference, over half the participants had no kids at all. Like, this is a new movement of people just now realizing like, oh, kids have value to the future, because we sort of forgot that as a society.
So then, I suppose I don't think that the label pronatalist should fairly describe the whole movement that you're speaking about, just in terms of like literal accuracy. Because if you're talking about reforming the system and talking about that, then clearly just having more babies isn't the only solution. So I would imagine that
Yeah.
the way I'm imagining it is that pronatalism would be one branch of a larger umbrella of people like yourselves who've looked into the future, imagined problems, and thought, okay, cool, these are going to be a lot easier to solve if we start taking action right now, of which one of them might be having more children. But it doesn't even really sound like it's necessarily even the bulk
Yeah.
of what you guys are trying to do. So that's a clarifying point for me. I'm
Yeah,
like,
so
okay, cool.
potentially a better word is vitalism, which a lot of people are throwing around now, which is this view that like we actually can influence the future, we can make it better, and humanity is fundamentally has the potential to be a force for good.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So okay, I believe that. Let's talk a little bit about this emphasis you guys are putting on the preservation of various cultures. I'm wondering if you can be honest, like how much of this is just a preemptive defense against accusations of white supremacy and that kind of thing. Like, do you really care about the preservation of other cultures? Like, I don't. I'm an individualist. I don't care about other cultures. I'm sort of like, if you do, can you explain to me why?
We
Yeah,
do.
yeah. It's
So
actually
Malcolm,
Oh, you
go ahead,
both care.
Malcolm.
You both
so,
want to get in on this.
no, so
Yeah.
well, it's I think it's the key point, or one of the key points of a working pronatalist movement. So right now we live in this weird system where there's the urban monoculture, which has sort of put a detente on cultural conflict. You know, it's saying all the various cultures in the world don't fight, like mostly because it wants to convert people out of them. You know, it appreciates diversity because it appreciates the diversity of victims, you know, in terms of people that it can convert to keep its numbers high. Well, it's going to collapse eventually. When it collapses, we are going to again enter a world of cultural conflict where the various cultural groups are at each other's necks again. To win, to be part of one of the winning groups, if you come into that world and you say, I am about pluralism, I will defend your family's right to your cultural practices, now you can default be allied with every other cultural group that has that value system. This gives you a very large and powerful pool of allies, which makes it possible for even minority cultural groups like my own family, you know, we have very weird family practices, to survive in the future. So it is a necessary point to survive, but it is also a point of, I think, fundamental good. I think that the way humanity improves intergenerationally is the cultural groups that have better hypotheses about how the world works, better hypotheses about how to raise their kids, better hypotheses about everything. As my wife says, the first 18 years of a kid's life are a sales pitch for your cultural system. The cultural groups that have better pitches are going to outcompete other groups and are going to represent a larger portion of humanity going forwards. But this process only works if there is a wide diversity of cultural groups. If you have one cultural group that's trying to enforce its values on everyone else, then you don't get this experimentation. And fundamentally, I think that that's what fascism really is. It's a government that uses its powers in the economy to promote a singular ideological perspective. But Simone, what were you going to say? I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
Well, just from like a logical, practical perspective, it doesn't matter if you love or hate other groups. If you look at this, even from, we'll say, an environmental perspective, if you have a monoculture of plants and something comes out and wipes it out, you're screwed. If you have a diversity in your ecosystem, you are much more likely to have something that's going to make it through into the future. Same goes for culture and memes and ideas. We are not going to succeed as humanity if we have a monoculture of ideas and approaches, if we get hit by some existential threat, if we have 3 cultures versus 348 cultures, which one do you think is going to build a solution? Like,
I so want to build on what you're saying here, Simone, because it's such a good thought, which is you want to manage a healthy cultural ecology, and that requires some level of diversity. So I can give an example of how you can have 2 groups that have different cultural perspectives, and if you have one of them being dominant, society suffers. So something that happened in the past was the Reformation, right? What was the core like challenge of the Reformation? You had one cultural group, the Catholic faction, that said the way that we should relate to truth is we should have experts who spend their entire lives studying a subject, and then, because anyone could claim to be an expert, we should then have those experts certified by a central bureaucracy, the church. And then you had another group that said, no, that central bureaucracy is susceptible to corruption, and therefore truth should be determined by the individual. And this led to a big conflict. We recently had this fight all over again during the COVID crisis, where we had one group that said truth should be determined by experts who have spent their entire life studying a subject and have been certified by central bureaucracy, the academic system. Then we had another group that said, no, truth should be determined by the individual. And it's humorous. If you look in the US, the predominantly Catholic settled areas like the cities were on the side of the experts should be deciding, and the more Protestant areas were actually, but both groups alone can lead to very negative outcomes. So if you only have the group that says truth should be determined by, authorities who have been certified by central bureaucracy, you get, the zero COVID policy in China, where you get like just extreme runaway bureaucracy. But on the other side, you get like QAnon and stuff like this, where everything's a conspiracy theory. Nothing can be trusted. But when you have both of these groups working together in society, you can reach a happy medium.
Okay, so I think, just to clarify where I'm coming from, I don't disagree. I just don't think you guys are going far enough, because you're speaking about a diversity of cultures, but cultures are inherently identitarian and collectivist. What you should be speaking about is individuals. There's no greater diversity than a society made up of, as if there's a million families, then a million different cultures.
Yeah, we actually do. We do. Malcolm wrote a book called The Pragmatist Guide to Crafting Religion, which is designed to be an individual's handbook to creating their own version of either a future-proofed and intergenerationally durable version of their inherited culture, like, we'll say, Catholicism or whatever, Irish Catholicism, or to literally create a new religion, which is what we, the freakish weirdos, have done. Because we believe in the importance of what we refer to as hard culture. That is to say, cultures where you have to make sacrifices and actually lean in to a strong cultural set that imparts fitness. And in order to do that, you either have to reinforce an existing culture and religion to make it survive in the face of modernity, the internet, globalization, where everything's falling apart now, or you have to just literally create something from first principles, or kind of pick and choose from a bunch of things you want and build something new. So we absolutely agree with that. And this is one of the reasons why pronatalism is such a cool cause. So think about environmentalism, right? The predominant notion, and I could kind of question this, but at least the way that most people have approached it is, in order for us to actually make things work with climate change, in order for us to prepare for the future, everyone has to get involved. Everyone has to change their lifestyle. Everyone has to, stop eating meat, recycle more, stop wasting, just don't drive, don't fly, etc. And that's still not enough, but everyone has to get involved. With pronatalism, and we're big on this, we don't want to guilt people into having kids. We don't think people should feel obligated to have kids. We really just want to make those who are enthusiastic about having kids more empowered to do so. And you only need a small number of families for each culture to create a future that is very pluralistic and diverse. So again, you don't need more people overall. We really want not only a lot of diversity in the future, but even more diversity than there is now.
If just we had 8 kids and our kids had 8 kids and we did that for 11 generations, we'd have more descendants than live on Earth today, which makes it very much not a tragedy of the commons problem. But anyway, continue with your point as to how you go further than us. Well,
what that means is that if we empower like 10,000 individual families to create unique cultures or reinforce cultures and sort of make them future proof, you have a more diverse future. And like to your point, we're getting individuals involved in this. This is an individual thing, and we're trying to create and empower this new network of culturally sovereign families. Now, here's what we really get bothered by. The media takes Malcolm's statement right there, to show how tractable this is and how much one family can do and make an impact. And they're like, see, he just wants the entire future to be just people exactly like him and culturally exactly like him, which is the most annoying thing, because that's the last thing we want. We don't want people to be like our weird family. We want as many people to take this idea and run with it and make their own cultures that frankly compete with ours, push back on ours, fight with ours, because that makes a more vibrant and ultimately more correct future. Because basically we all know that we're kind of wrong. But when we disagree with each other, when we debate, when we find something closer to the truth in between all of our stances, we get a little bit less wrong and a little bit more close to the truth. And that's what we're aiming for here. So
I'd love it as an opportunity to just have a little bit more like back and forth. I do feel like sometimes my initial question might just sort of springboard into a lot of things and we'll lose track of where I'm kind of going. So we'll just discipline on this particular point. We'll just go down into these individuals. So what I've just find slightly frustrating about listening to those responses is it doesn't seem totally congruent, because it feels like you're going to borrow from the individualistic perspective when it kind of suits. But then everything I heard you speak about, and before that, you were defending on the basis of cultures. As far as we can tell, if we've lived in an information age with globalization and information sharing, then the cultures are already in a battle of ideas. We're watching it play out right now. I don't want to prop up cultures that are fundamentally abusive, anti-individual. I want them to die out. This is my perspective as an individualist. I don't care about cultures. I care about individual humans. It sounds like you get where I'm coming from. You agree to a certain degree, but there's almost a reluctance to let the battle play out to any kind of national victor. Like, why do you want to prop up losing cultures? Why even speak about cultures?
What makes you think
take
they're
the
losing?
next step?
No, hold on. Yeah, I do want to address this point because I think it's a great point, and we are not individualists in that respect. I believe that if we are actually correct, and that what I do want is a society where anyone can leave their culture after the age of like 18 if they want to, right? What I don't want is a society in which we're actively trying to stamp out cultures because the dominant cultural perspective is that, well, they're not being individualist enough. Because it could turn out that our individualist perspective is the very thing that is causing low fertility rates and mental health crises and stuff like that. So if I'm going to give an example that's a microcosm of this, in conservative Jewish cultures, they practice circumcision, right? The individualist perspective could say, well, the kid didn't choose to be circumcised, and this is technically a form of abuse, and therefore it shouldn't be allowed. What I would say is, actually, I disagree with that. If it turns out, like who's the best person to judge whether or not they should circumcise their child? It's someone who themselves has been circumcised, somebody who was part of that cultural group and chose to continue that cultural group. And if it turns out that circumcision is having a negative effect on these children's lives, then either they will choose to stop circumcising, or no, they just will choose to stop circumcising. Now, if somebody comes to me and they say, well, I was circumcised as a kid, but I think circumcision is bad, and I'm like, okay, then don't circumcise your own kids. And they're like, well, I didn't have kids, right? I don't have as many kids as the people who were circumcised and decide to continue the circumcision practice. Then what I would say is, Well, hold on here. What you just told me is this is a cultural technology that seems to be having some sort of positive effect, that seems to be able to motivate the intergenerational reproduction of a culture. And the people who abandon this cultural practice are also abandoning whatever motivated that cultural group to intergenerationally replicate itself. In which case, I would say that your subjective belief that like this cultural practice is bad is proven by reality to be wrong. And this is why I approach reality from this cultural perspective, because I think as soon as you take the ultra individual perspective, it gives you the authority to be culturally imperious over other groups' children. You can say, I don't like the way you're doing X, so I can take your kids.
We hate on other cultures. We hate on other cultures all the time. Like we may feel that certain practices are repugnant, that they're abusive, that they're horrible for children, that they're a terrible way to live, that they're inhumane. But ultimately, competition has to play out here.
That doesn't give us the right to go and take their kids, because as soon as I take that perspective, then all sorts of negative externalities result downstream of that. And this has been the argument that the urban monoculture has predominantly used in its attempts to take people's kids from these
keep in mind, they're trying to
take
our kids right now. They're literally trying to have our kids taken away from us.
And if society, okay, I'm not going to talk any further on this because shorter answers.
I mean, I do have a lot of notes. Yeah. Okay. So there's maybe 3 different threads that I want to pull on here. So the first one, I suppose, it seems like you judge the merit of a culture by its ability to induce people to have more children. That's a marker of success. I think it's okay. No.
That stay in the culture and replicate it. So not just have a bunch of kids. They're just spamming kids, and those kids hate their parents. Like that's not,
And it's a marker of success. It's not the only marker of success. We also believe that a sign of cultural success is a culture that is advancing and that is literally building the future.
Technological productivity, but we can get to that separately.
Yeah, so we talk a lot about, just to clarify, like technophilic cultures, because those are the cultures that are going to take us off the planet. Those are the cultures that are building infrastructure. Those are the cultures that are building trade networks, that are improving our quality of life, inventing new products. So you can have, for example, the Amish, which we love. They're really close to us here in Pennsylvania. You know, we like to watch them drive by in their horses and buggies, but the Amish are not going to change the world fundamentally. And they're also highly dependent on other cultures and other cultures' infrastructure in order to maintain their own cultural sovereignty. So if, for example, the United States fell, they would no longer have the protection the United States affords them to not, for example, serve in wars and participate in other governmental systems that right now they're exempt from.
Yeah, I suppose, but they would view everybody outside of their community as English. They probably don't feel that much greater affinity to the American government than to any kind of governments. They have their own sense of sovereignty. So
they don't, but they're dependent on the American government for that right.
Well, they're dependent on one government to protect against other governments, but they're probably just against governments in general. So I think that's a dishonest framing, frankly. But
no. I have a gun and I want to go take Amish land, and the U.S. government doesn't exist. I can do that because they can't fight back. These pacifist cultures can only exist when somebody else is using violence or the threat of violence to maintain their cultural autonomy. Amish only exist as Amish because the U.S. government protects them.
Right. Well,
they don't see it that way, but it's true.
This is my point, is that you see it that way. They don't. I don't really care about this as a point, so I'm happy to drop it. But my point is that they would view you and the government both as outsiders. They don't make the same distinction that you're imagining them to make. To you just all be a band of thieves. But that's, it's not really what I'm interested in. What I'm interested in is the sort of the merits by which you're judging a culture. I'd say that the values are mistaken. So you've got replacement, the ability to create more children. I think you mentioned technological sort of advancement. For me, I'll judge the merits of a culture by the happiness of the individuals inside that culture. That's what's important. I think that's a better metric, because what is the point of reproducing? What is the point of technologically advancing unless the human life is enjoyable for those individuals? I'd like to hear your
there's so much here. I mean, one, that's your cultural value, and you're practicing cultural imperialism by imposing that on other people, right? But the other thing is, and we just sort of philosophically.
No, hold on, let him jump in.
Because again, it's not for you to frame the statement that I've just made to say that it's a cultural value that I've had. This is an individual value that I have. Myself, Alexander Grace, I take full responsibility for this as an individual. So I don't want to be framed in or lumped in with another culture, despite the culture's like progress, I suppose, and like contribution towards me reaching this conclusion. It's me. I'm accountable for it.
So what I would say is throughout human history, like, and I understand that this is a dominant framework right now. Happiness is a thing of value, but throughout human history, the highest value of almost no successful cultural group has been happiness. It's a very odd and modern concept that sort of this general utilitarianism, that maximizing aggregate human happiness is the goal of human civilization. And I would argue it's a fundamentally wrong-headed. Like, even if that's your goal, when you live a life dedicated to happiness, it leads to lower happiness outcomes. When, like, a lot of the practices that cultures had that we didn't understand historically, like, why does almost every long-lived cultural group have some sort of arbitrary self-denial ritual, whether it's Passover or Ramadan or Feast of the Firstborn? Well, because it turns out that these strengthen the inhibitory pathways in your prefrontal cortex, which makes it easier to shut down like snowballing thoughts, like anxiety and depression and stuff like that. And so we as a, and I could say that, like, to us, this is a cultural value. When I say that I do not value happiness above all other things, like, I value it on the margin, but I don't think it's the core value of a human life. I say that as this is my culture. And as to why I don't value it above all things, the things that generate positive emotional stimuli in me are just the things that when my ancestors felt them in a completely different, like, historic environmental context, caused them to have more surviving offspring. Like, to me, that does not line up with a list of fundamentally true things. To me, that would be like humans as like a group of paperclip maximizing robots getting together and deciding that, like, the number of paperclips has intrinsic value. And then one of them is like, well, we were programmed to want to make as many paperclips as possible, but maybe we should try to think outside of our own programming. So that's sort of where we come from on that question.
Okay. So I'm going to need you to simplify that for me. Explain that to me like I'm 5. Why doesn't happiness matter for an individual?
No, so even if you think happiness matters, trying to get happiness by pursuing it directly, we find empirically produces unhappiness.
Okay, but that's not
and
what
that
I said.
Instead,
yeah, Simone.
I mean,
again, why doesn't
like,
happiness matter?
It's
because
a straw
it's
man.
serendipitous.
Okay, so to say that somebody's pursuing happiness and they're ignoring meaning, purpose, community, sacrifice, self-abnegation, all of that, which could indirectly lead to more happiness, is just an argument about seeking happiness in a poor way. But I didn't say that. I'm just saying that ultimately the measure by which you're judging all of these other values ultimately has to do with the positive emotions generated inside an individual human. So you can dress it up whatever way you like, but it's fundamentally dishonest to put anything other than human happiness at the point of it. And so I feel like if that's the case, and that's obviously the standard by which you're measuring it, then why not just go straight to that? Why do it in such an indirect way?
Well, because we don't actually personally care about human happiness.
I was explaining why we don't care. We don't care because it's serendipitous, because it's a genetic scar due to random evolutionary conditions. I actually think that a paperclip maximizing robot has more right to believe that paperclips are a thing of intrinsic value than we have a right to believe happiness is a thing of intrinsic value, because that paperclip maximizing robot can at least say, well, somebody intentionally programmed me to be this way. The things that generate happiness in us are an evolutionary accident. So I turn the question back around to you and say, why do you think the things that you're programmed to want are things of intrinsic value, these pleasure-causing emotional subsets?
It's such a bizarre argument that you've just presented, as though the intention, the fact that evolution has, come about somewhat randomly and that humans developed a capacity for self-consciousness at some point, diminishes its value. That is, frankly, quite strange from people who want to increase the human population of diversity. It's one of the most anti-human things I've ever heard. Aren't you just absolutely awed by humanity in the way that I am, moved to tears frequently at how extraordinary the experience of life is, how rich with meaning, how diverse our pleasure, just the gorgeousness of feeling yourself to be a consciousness interacting with other consciousnesses and the world. It's the most extraordinary thing ever. It's the true thing of value that we have. And so the kind of paperclip, like genetic scar, I think was the way that you reduced happiness. The
Yeah.
only conclusion I can reach from that is that your happiness can't have been particularly profound in your life for you to dismiss it so clearly. I know for myself, the happiness I've experienced has shocked me, stunned me, brought me to my knees with joy and love and just praising whatever's out there in the universe for allowing me to experience this. I just feel sad for you
So
that you don't see things
when
the
I
same way.
look at the world, I see the same beauty you see. I see the beauty of humanity and civilization and the things that we have created and the things that we do. And then I look at the pre-programmed emotional subsets, and I see that as the enemy of all of those things. I see that as the animalistic side of us, the side that we share with dogs and apes, and that draws us down and that causes us to, whether it's in rage, go to war, or over love, go to war, that points us towards outcomes that aren't necessarily in line with our thought through value system, but that are just masturbating sort of pre-programmed emotional subsets.
I mean, there may be a certain percentage of the population that can experience the world that cognitively, for most people, there's an intersection between our evolutionary instincts playing themselves out, mixed in with a mind far more developed than evolution probably ever could have imagined or anybody could have imagined has got there. And it's the ability to blend those two. The idea, like the sort of human existence that you're speaking about as a kind of floating consciousness divorced of all of our natural human instincts sounds like a dystopian nightmare to me. It sounds awful. It would strip me fundamentally of my humanity. I actually like the feeling that goes back and goes like, ooh, ape, beat chest, make love to woman, find delicious food, like, oh, fatty meat, yum, and then the ability to consciously think about that as well. I love the animal part of me. I love the human part of me. It sounds like you are at war with your own nature and are kind of like ashamed of your evolutionary history. I find it incredibly depressing.
So I would say that this view, our view on happiness, is not representative of the pronatalist movement's view. The pronatalist movement's view would be you and I have different cultural hypotheses about how we should relate to happiness, and we can live in a world in which we disagree. And that this is actually the key point of the pronatalist movement, that we should each have cultural sovereignty. You should have the opportunity to try your system with your kids, and we should have the right to try our system with our kids, and our kids get to be the judge of which one of us was right. Who better to judge the merits of a system than somebody who grew up in it? So I like your view is logically consistent, and I appreciate it. I just disagree with it.
Okay, well, that's probably as good as we can hope for in that instance. I see you guys in so many ways, and I want to reassure the audience, you're not getting a realistic perception of how much I think common ground is actually shared between the three of us here. We're probably focusing on the parts where we're not, but it does feel like a missed opportunity here. I would desperately like to recruit people like yourselves over to the side of individualism. I think at one point, like Simone, you said, like competition has to allow itself to play out. I'm trying to point out the logical inconsistency that you guys seem to have in your minds, where the one hand, you're trying to preserve cultures because you believe in diversity, and the other hand, which to me is not allowing competition to play itself out, even though you can recognize it. From my perspective, it's playing itself out. It's already making its results known. And the fundamental lesson to be learned from all of human history is that cultures can enable human flourishing as an individual, and they can also diminish human flourishing. And the cultures that do the best to promote individuals are the ones that have a very light touch, almost to the point that you wouldn't even necessarily call them cultures. So taking it to its natural extreme, embracing an individual as a freedom. I can see both of you are kind of itching, so go for it.
Okay. Here's where I push back about that. I do not think it's playing itself out in a fair ecosystem. And this lack of a fair ecosystem is what I find so distressing. If every cultural group is forced to send their children into a school system that is controlled by one extremist cultural group that has almost no kids, and that cultural group is using the school system, and that cultural group also controls all of the media production in your culture, all of the you would say that's bad. Like the residential school system program in Canada, where they took the children of Native American families and put them in schools to try to erase their culture. I think that that was fundamentally an evil thing to do. And they were like, look, but these native groups, they're savages, they're deplorable, their culture isn't right. We're saving these kids. I think that that was a fundamentally evil thing. So when we campaign for something like cultural sovereignty, where do we mean that? We mean that people should have the right to educate their kids the way that they see fit to educate their kids, and they should have a right to do things like discipline their kids the way they see fit to discipline their kids.
That's what kills me though, Malcolm, is what you've just said there. That is an individualist statement, and it's a beautiful one. It's one I completely get behind. So I just don't use the language of like culture, like just strip it from your vocabulary would be my advice.
Here's a different way to put it, though. And this is something that Malcolm covers extensively in his book, The Pragmatist Guide to Crafting Religion. Religion is a technology. It's a software that humanity, that civilization evolved to function on top of our hardware, our wetware, essentially, like our biological bodies. As soon as humans started living in societies that were larger than, we'll say, like little, tribal groups where we could kind of figure everything out instinctively, we had to evolve culture to deal with the complications that above and beyond we just couldn't evolutionarily keep up with, because once you're living in cities, things are moving real fast, and they do if you look at history. So culture exists to make it possible for us to function properly in these complex societies that frankly we haven't evolved to live with, right? We haven't evolved to deal with processed food. We haven't evolved to deal with so many of these things, right? Culture is what protects us from this technology, or enables us to survive and flourish within it. So when you strip out culture, and this is what you're seeing as collectivist, but we don't really, when you strip out culture, you're basically stripping out an immune system that humans have that protects them from a lot of harmful effects of the technology of urbanization, globalization, complex societies that we haven't evolved to deal with. And so when you take this super hyper individualistic concept of let's just strip out the culture, let's strip out anything collectivist, let's not identify with anything, what you're doing is you're nuking your immune system, and you are just exposing yourself to something that we haven't figured out how to deal with, which is why you see rampant obesity in the United States, which is why you see all these, because we haven't, for example, developed the ability to naturally have inhibitory pathways that protect us from things like hyper processed foods, that protect us from things like, super broken dating markets. So we agree that individualism is important, and we want everyone to have their own crack at things, but we also agree, or we don't, well, what we hold that everyone should either create for themselves their own, even this is going to be on an individual level, a hard culture that protects them from society, from civilization, that keeps them safe, or join one.
Let her finish. Hold on. This was the most convincing thing I've heard so far, Simone. I really enjoyed that listening. That was really.
I'm just presenting Malcolm's argument. That's all.
Is that why he's itching to say? He wants to.
I love you. No, I think that this also, the mental health crisis is downstream of what you're talking about. But I want to talk about actually where the core difference is between cultural individualism and like perfect individualism that you're talking about.
Okay.
And how we relate to children. This is where the cultural distinction matters so much. Because if you go pure individualism, then a child that says, I don't want to be spanked or something like that. Well, it's the child's right to say they don't want to be spanked, even if in the data we see positive effects from something like this. Or the child who says, this is where it goes off the rails. You have a 4-year-old who says, I think I'm the opposite gender than I was born. And because the dominant cultural group in our society is true individualists, the parents can say, well, that's not in our cultural framework, or we at least think that you should wait till you're 18 to make these decisions. But then the child says, no, I'm 5, society will support me, and we're in this true individualist society. So then the child gets to make these choices. And that's where I think you see a spiral negative effect from pure individualism, because it puts responsibility on children whose brains aren't fully developed to make decisions about what they want. And this pursuit of what I want in the moment always, which you're going to get in a childlike mind, is going to lead to downstream negative consequences like mental health effects, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't support any version of individualism that places children's rights above their parents' rights. I've never heard of such a philosophy. To me, it actually, I would more likely posit the scenario that you just outlined there of a child disobeying their parents and submitting to the culture or going to them for help would be more expressive of a collectivist society than a hyper individualist one. So I don't disagree with you. I feel uncomfortable because I'm like, surely you
Well,
can't lay such an absurdity at the feet of individualists. I've never heard anybody.
oh,
I did.
I think that hyper-individualism intrinsically leads to collectivism.
All right, you have to walk me through that one.
Okay. Well, so because it gives the cultural group that practices hyper-individualism the right to every other cultural group's children if they say that this hyper-individualism also applies to children. If they say that if a child disagrees with the way that their parents are parenting them, or that this way does not align with a hyper-individualist style, then we have a right to their children, which eventually leads in cultural homogenization around hyper-individualist value systems.
I've never ever, and I mean this. It's if it exists, I apologize. I'm very familiar with individualist thought and philosophy. I've never once ever heard anybody advocate for children's rights in that regard. So I don't even know how
We're
to respond to
literally
that.
seeing it in our civilization right now. Like it's literally what we're doing.
Nobody
This
is doing
in
it
New
in the name of
Jersey.
individualism. I'm not saying that what you're talking about doesn't exist. To just lay it at the feet of individualists, and again, I'm not going to even bother disagreeing with you because I just don't know. That's completely new data to me that anybody could possibly be saying because I'm an individualist. This is what I'm going to support this person doing. I've never heard it being applied in that way.
Yeah, they wouldn't use the term individualism. I agree with you there. They would use some other argument, but I think that I guess from my perspective, their arguments are downstream of an individualist plea that we need to save this child from their family because of individualism, because of the child's. But you're right. Yeah, it may not be
It would be a
totally downstream
violation of
individualism.
that parent's rights to raise their children the way that they want. And I suppose this would be a decent time for us to revisit corporal punishment from the example you gave at the start. So you guys have the data that says that certain targeted, I suppose, light corporal punishment can have a beneficial effect on children, and the data was skewed or misrepresented. So corporal punishment got like a bad name or something like that. Could you, sorry, just
Yeah.
sort of restate so I understand it better? Why
So
did
there
you
was a
strike your boy?
period. Yeah, there was a period where it was widely believed that corporal punishment was bad. The problem is that the science was highly motivated during this period because they considered it a human rights abuse, and then they went out and did the study, and they didn't separate people into like different groups based on how extreme the corporal punishment was. They didn't. They would like consider our daughter, who's not being corporally punished because she doesn't act up in the way our boys do, like obviously in a different category. And then there was the 2023 paper called Parental Punishment, Don't Throw the Baby Out with the Bathwater, that revisited all this. And it was a giant meta study that then looked at the studies that actually used proper controls, and it showed neutral to slightly positive effects. But this isn't the only reason. It's also just common sense. When a child is at an age range between like 2 and 4, and they can't understand concepts like that could kill your sister, that could kill yourself, you need a way to elevate specific bad actions as a unique kind of bad action. And there are really only two ways you can do this when you're in a like crowded immediate environment, like i.e. if you have a ton of kids. You can either emotionally escalate, like tell the kid, like get angry at them or something like that, or you
Shame.
can physically escalate. Yeah. If you look at what we did, it was a light slap to the face. We choose the face because you don't have to cause as much pain to like shock and reorient and redirect attention. So it reoriented him, but I immediately said, and this was recorded in the piece, Daddy loves you, but you need to be nice when you're in restaurants. So I was immediately, instead of emotionally isolating him, show him he had crossed a boundary, but then assure him he's still under my emotional protection. If I combine that emotional protection with like anger, like that's really scary to a kid. I think that we as a society, we got so afraid of causing like in the moment physical distress to children, we forgot that the emotional subset that we are escalating in children when we emotionally isolate or emotionally escalate is, oh my God, my parents might abandon me, which historically happened a lot and children died from this. So their brain is now going into, oh my God, I'm going to die mode, because
Yeah, think
we
about like
removed the
evolutionarily. if we think about evolutionarily what probably has happened with children's minds, what should they be more afraid of? Corporal punishment has been pretty ubiquitous. I mean, you see it in mammals all over the place. After verbal escalation, we should be clear. You know, you see them kind of, for example, we've spent a lot of time like observing wild animals on this because we feel like if you can't trust the mainstream research, let's look at other correlates. They always growl or something first, and then they swat. So that happens all the time. It's ubiquitous. So kids know it's just like this is how boundaries are established. And kids are a lot like bumper cars or kind of like blind people kind of figuring out like a Roomba, sort of like, okay, where are the boundaries? Oh, I hit a boundary. I'm going to go in this way now. You know, oh, I hit a boundary. I'm going to go in this way now. And sometimes it's, you know, they get hurt themselves and then they discover something hurts. So they're not going to do it anymore. Or sometimes, you know, a parent says, here's where the boundary is physically. So that's normal. It's not going to cause a feeling of panic or dread or existential fear in a child. It's how they learn. And frankly, if they're not doing it, they're not learning. It's a key part of play. It's a key part of boundary pushing and learning. Now, with rejection, if a kid thinks that they're going to be rejected, and this we see this in our own kids, if they by mistake think that we're rejecting them, like for example, if like one of us has to leave the room to get something from the other room, and a kid's feeling particularly emotional, they freak out because yes, there is a history of kids being exposed, abandoned, left if for some reason they're defective or otherwise they misbehave, and it would make sense that humans and children have evolved an existential fear of being left alone and exposed and rejected by their parents, because if they are, and if they fail to fix that, they will die. They will die. So the idea that all these parents were like, well, I would never lay a hand on my child, are at the same time exposing their child to what is really for them a fear of death. It's like waterboarding a child emotionally.
And I would also point out, why
insane to us.
Why would humans evolve pain? Like, why did I evolve pain? Why does it hurt when I touch a stove? It hurts so that I can learn to not touch a stove. Pain is part of the way that humans learn about the world around them. If you remove this mechanism, and I don't think that you should punish for pain. I think equally wrong-headed to a blanket ban on any sort of physical escalation with kids at the age where they can't understand like death and stuff like that is delayed and ritualized punishment. The idea of
or punishment out of anger.
Or punishment out of anger, or punishment with the intent to cause pain. When we do it, the intent is to shock and reorient attention. I think if you like do the delayed, because if you do it with the intent to cause pain, like if the pain is the purpose of the punishment, then you get this downstream cycle of the more bad in action, the more pain I need to cause. And this can lead to abuse, or the parent then feels justified in causing pain out of emotion. And it was very clear in the piece where this was recorded with our kids. I was not emotional in the moment. I just went back to the conversation. The kid stopped crying within 30 seconds. He didn't even cry. He whimpered, as it said, and then went back to laughing and watching, because like kids evolved to relate to their parents in this way. I mean, I think it's only natural that you can parent without any sort of physical touch, and some kids don't need it. Like girls often don't need it. Like when I look at my boys, I think the reason I didn't even notice that I had done something is I regularly punch my boys during play much harder than I hit them during punishment. Well, anyone who's dealt with boys knows this, and boys love like punching and fighting and all of this.
Some boys are really sensitive and they are not good candidates for this form of communication, but our boys are extremely rough and tumble, and also they're, like Malcolm, extremely anti-authoritarian. So,
Yeah, like this kid who I punished, he was born a few months early. So for like a month, every day I would go to the hospital and I would sit all day with him on my lap, so that he could bond and develop as much as possible. I am not somebody who is like emotionally distant from my children or dislike my children in any way. I'm just parenting in a way that, and it's a cultural hypothesis. It could turn out to be wrong. And sometimes like research consensus turns out to be wrong. And I think that this is where the mainstream culture is really wrong-headed. Is it's like, if the research all agrees to something, it's never going to be overturned. And now we have a right to like force families to do this. But this is where we got like lobotomies out of and stuff like this. I mean, I think every parent has a duty to think for themselves what's in the best interest of their child with all the information they have access to.
All right, cool. Thank you. That was very thorough. A lot of it made sense. I agree with a lot of it. I think that for people who have, I'll start off by saying I don't plan on hitting my children. I only have a daughter so far, so it hasn't come up. I take your point about boys.
Yeah.
I don't know that it would ever come to that, and I'll explain my reasons for it in the moment. But I don't think everybody's going to understand the nuance of what you just explained there, and that's
Yeah.
potentially dangerous. I understand it. The difference,
Yeah.
obviously, in that you are disciplining without emotion. Therefore, you're not teaching your children that it's the correct way to deal with their emotions is to be physical. That way, it's not as likely to be replicated. That I
Totally.
get, that I understand.
Mhm.
I'm going to say a couple of things now, not necessarily to undermine, but just to stimulate a little bit of
Mhm.
discussion. Here's one thing that I would say is that prevention is obviously better than restricting to the consequence. One of the dangers I can foresee having this as a style is that if you know that that is available to you as an option at some point to snap attention right back, you might not be as vigilant as you could be in the hour leading up to when emotions have gotten that high, that is necessary. For families who have the same value system that you do with regards to emotional engagement, but also have a no hitting policy under any circumstances, they might be a little bit more self-aware and attentive to their children so that it doesn't get to that point. And I don't know,
Mhm.
that was probably, it's not a universal thing, because there might be some boys, there is no particular point where you can sort of do that. But I also imagine it might stifle creativity. And I don't imagine, I'm sure you're itching, I'm almost done. I don't imagine that every single person who hears what you've just described is going to have your level of emotional self-control or understanding behind
Mhm.
it. So unfortunately, as you know, parenting experts to some degree, certainly not in every circle, but to many people would read your books and look up to you. There is obviously a danger of people misunderstanding where you're coming from. Now, whether or not the cure it would be worse than the disease in this instance, you know, I'm not in a position to say. I would be interested to
Yeah.
see that data. But yeah, I've got more, but please tell me your response to what I said
So,
so
so
far.
I want to address this because I think this is really important. So, point I want to make that I didn't say that, one thing we're really afraid of teaching our children is that the correct response to somebody crossing their boundaries is emotional escalation, and I think a lot of society has grown up being taught that right now, and I think it's a negative thing. I think reacting calmly is really important. But I think to your point, we do not want our kids to not push these boundaries. Like we actually like the idea of preventing them from acting like this. I wouldn't want that. My goal is to raise like as much flame of human spirit in my kids as possible. I love it when they're acting rowdy and acting up and looking for the boundaries in their environment. And so the only way to prevent them from occasionally, like the Roomba, hitting the wall would be to either like calm my kids down. And that's one of the things I'm so afraid of, is ever being one of those parents who's like, you have too much energy right now. You need to calm down. I love them having energy. I don't want them to learn that having energy is bad. But then the second thing is not bring them into environments where them acting up might require an immediate negative response. Like in this case, it was in a restaurant or them almost running into the street. This is also a problem. We had a rabies scare in our yard recently where a bat was found with rabies. So like our kids go play in the woods with us. I need to be able to escalate quickly when dealing with 3 kids running around in the woods. And I feel like if I didn't have these tools, I would feel scared to put them in these types of high risk environments, which is going to lead to them getting less environmental stimulus. So I totally hear where like this could go wrong, right? Like
Two
somebody
small
hears
add-on
this wrong, or
points.
they're
One is, I think if you have 1 or 2 kids, this is probably never going to be an issue because you can do exactly what you described. You have the ability to watch them closely, see when it's coming, preempt it, stop, etc. We've had parents who, write to us and they're like, yeah, I see your point about corporal punishment, but here are all the things that we do to avoid it. And it's like, oh, well, we eat on the floor with our child, so he doesn't have to throw food from a chair. And,
That's
we do all these things. And I'm like, that's
how you
nice.
deal with it.
But when you have like 4, 5, 6 kids, that's just not gonna happen. And there's this level of like, I agree, and most parents should never do this. Also, I totally support and I understand why the research is like, nope, never touch a child, never do it, because you're totally right. Most people do not have the ability to understand the nuance here and practice the discipline to never hit their kids in anger, to always only ever do it immediately when it's in context, when you're actually providing that like wall, that boundary, instead of like just ritualistically punishing a child. So we understand why the research is there, why the bias is there, why the zero tolerance policy is there, because there is nuance here and so much discipline is required. And we are very against child abuse. But you know, it's hard because when you have these nuanced conversations, you know, people are choosing between evils. And right now they're choosing evils that either like a complete lack of discipline, which is really hurting kids, or they're medicating their kids to high heaven so they can't really do anything in the first place, or they're emotionally terrorizing their kids.
I never punish my kid and their kid's on like Zoloft or something. It's like, well, you know, maybe that's down. But I want to address, because people be like, well, you shouldn't have a lot of kids, right? Like, if like this is why we should have smaller family sizes. To understand like the reasonable number of kids we need to have, a recent poll showed that of the younger generation, only 45% of women want to have kids. That would mean that for our population to stay stable, that 45% would have to have over 4 kids each. And like, that's obviously not going to happen. So it means those of us that want big families really need to go big, like 6 or 7.
Sorry, let me.
Yeah, continue.
Because that's going to take us in a different direction of the population and society and things like that. And it's
This is Indy.
Hi, Indy. Really? Oh, okay. Yeah, I have a personal connection to that name. How gorgeous. How old?
2 months.
Oh, I miss that age. Baby. Oh, look at her. She's holding her head up and everything.
Yeah, she came out like almost 9 pounds. So she's a robust young lady.
Good to go. Oh my gosh. So precious. Congratulations, you two. That's amazing.
Thank you.
So yeah, I'd love to speak about quality versus quantity at some point. But speaking just directly to the point about corporal punishment here, so I take your point about you want to have tools to be able to raise like awareness about dangers like rabies or whatever it might be, bears in the woods, things like that. What I would say is that actually, as far as I know, the research suggests that the more that you escalate sort of quickly, then the less effective those boundaries are. And so a light hit is not going to do it next time. You're going to need a bigger hit and a bigger hit and a bigger hit. And so as minimum necessary force, which I think is your own version is kind of what you're doing. But I'm guessing that for a lot of families with fewer children who can be more attentive and focus on prevention, just a raised voice in an emergency is probably enough to snap them to attention. That's one thing. The other thing I would say is that I think that there's just a slightly mistaken framing, I suppose, in your understanding of child psychology when you say that it's demonstrative of spirit in order for them to test boundaries. That's not typically actually what mainstream psychology would suggest is what's going on there. High energy, high spirit can absolutely be expressed, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in a way where they're looking for boundaries. When they're looking for boundaries, it tends to be more antisocial kind of tendencies where they're curious to know what they can get away with, when they're feeling insecure in the environment, insecure in the authority figures and the rules that are being placed out there. So it typically comes from fear. Children who are brought up in loving environments where they're given a lot of attention, a lot of validation for their emotions, they're not lower energy children. It just doesn't get expressed in a way that's antagonistic. So I wouldn't be so quick to just assume that all the boundary testing that you're seeing in your family is necessarily a positive thing. It doesn't have to be negative either. I just wouldn't ascribe more virtue to that than anyway. But yeah, I don't know.
No, it's just a different cultural value set. I completely agree with you that this is what the mainstream psychology says. It's just not the way we relate to these ideas.
Okay. Okay. So, but I mean, okay. So just to delve into that, I suppose, like you like that your children might have an anti-authoritarian bent, but what I would say is that if your child isn't developing the mental sophistication to be able to tell what is an authority worth challenging, if they just have a dislike of authority in general, then you're not teaching your values as strongly as you would like, because in a situation where, it was an emergency about a volcano erupting and you're not a volcano expert, Malcolm, you would defer to the volcano expert. So you're a smart person. You know when the right time is to defer to authority. My child, and I know I only have one daughter, so it's not an apples for apples comparison, but she doesn't test boundaries or test authority in this manner, but we don't really give her a reason to, because the conditions of our household are legitimate, they're fair, they're understandable, they're predictable. But I don't at all expect her to be the kind of person to grow up who's going to be okay with arbitrary authority. We're teaching her that it's not a matter of disobeying or obeying. You have to judge each situation based on its merits. I don't know.
I mean, I will add though, the situation in which Malcolm did Bob our kid that was covered by The Guardian that caused all the controversy was in a system where our kid was bumping up against what he thought was a really dumb arbitrary rule, which is, you know, it was a very unusual situation. A journalist was spending the entire day with us, following us around and basically asking for our attention on days where we are usually 100% with the kids, playing with them. So here he is sitting at this restaurant table. This journalist is peppering Malcolm with questions. This kid's getting bored. You know, we've tried to keep him occupied and busy and, you know, let him have fun. But like in the end, he's like, this is stupid. So we don't blame him for doing that. And typically, you know, when this happens, it's not an ideal situation. And we think that this type of discipline or any type of discipline often happens because, it's a shitty system. It's something that's not working properly. And that day wasn't working properly because we had a journalist following us around. That's not ideal at all. But whenever journalists come and talk with us about pronatalism, inevitably they want the kids around because we want to see the kids. We want to watch you with the kids because that's what you're all about, right? Is kids. But that's not exactly, you know, how kids want to spend their time, if you know what I mean.
I completely understand that. Thank you for adding the additional context. I'd also imagine, I don't think you have children over 6 yet, like all your kids are young.
Yeah, and we're not going to do this if you can reason with a kid.
This is what I was thinking is once their prefrontal cortex comes on, it's gonna change.
100%. Yeah, and there are all these people online who are, you know, critics of us, and they're like, well, you know, I was beaten and spanked as like, you know, 6th grade. And we're like, well, dude, that's bad. Like it's not the way to communicate. Like we're not going to be, we have no plan on doing that, but they just assume the worst. Of course they. And I get that. I mean, we have recently the whole 8-passenger scandal that has sort of become quite, you know, discussed online, and we've discussed it too. We think it's horrifying. So it's very easy for someone to just make a lot of assumptions when you hear about any form of corporal punishment.
And you two are not shying away from notoriety. You know the territory you're getting yourselves into. You're smart people. Yeah. So and look, I actually appreciate the humor with which you're taking this, and I understand your perspective perhaps more than most people were. And I don't see a caricature of it. I see exactly where you're coming from. I'm not necessarily in a position to say whether or not I'm in agreement because I don't have as many children. I suspect I still wouldn't, but then I think that I am tempered. But this is going to support you, but I am tempered by I don't think I would have so many children so that it got to the point where that sort of thing was necessary. You have a different value system you're operating under, which we're fleshing out right now. And I think this is a good segue. And perhaps the last thing that we'll sort of talk about, which is the population collapse and what I would imagine. I want to give you my reasons at this stage for why I'm not concerned. And I'd like you to pick holes in them. I'd like you to tell me what I'm not seeing. And I'll see if I change my mind on this. So I know that you probably are not so concerned about the humanity's impact on the environment. You would imagine that humans can create breeding programs in zoos to protect biodiversity. We can replant trees. Humanity is probably good for the environment to a certain degree. I imagine you subscribe to beliefs that can be generally summarized like that. Is it good enough for me to keep going, or do you need to clarify?
I mean, I think we're causing harm to the environment right now, but I'm
we're not going to run out of
degree
food.
In environmental study.
My background is in environmental advocacy, originally. I created a special major to study it. I worked for environmental nonprofits. I studied climate change and environmental interventions extensively. So we do care about it. And just a little side note, if you do care about the environment and you do care about sustainability, the worst thing you can do is have 0 kids and not pass your culture on to them, because who in the future is going to care about the environment? Because the predominant group that does care about sustainability, the environment, et cetera, is this group that has a very low birth rate. And as much as they try to convert people from other groups, those groups are, any system, going to essentially develop defenses against having their people converted. So over time, there are going to be fewer and fewer people who take on these values and represent them in the future. So if you care about environmentalism, pronatalism is an issue that's important to you. But yeah, we agree that this is important. And again, a big important thing with pronatalism is we're not saying we want to spam the world with more people. We don't necessarily want a huge human population.
Okay, I appreciate where you're coming from, and I think I understand it quite clearly. I think what were you saying that I really wanted to respond to? No, it's lost me. So I'll just go on with my original point then. So environmental reasons is one reason why I'm not concerned about smaller amounts of humans. I'd like to see the planet, recover to a certain degree. I value life, not just human life. The other one is that I'm not concerned necessarily about the economic models sustaining as they're going, because I imagine that robotics and artificial intelligence is going to pick up the slack, which I imagine you guys have thought about, and you probably have some interesting responses. But I do imagine that governments need to adapt and learn how to tax companies for um, to replace the taxpayer base that's going to be shrinking. But the world that I foresee in the future will be one where having children is not necessary to keep the economy going. I think as human life and mental capacity flourishes, and we give time away from trauma and actually get to explore the depth of what it means to be alive and to be conscious, the value that we should be placing on humans raises higher and higher and higher and higher. Way back when you had children because at age 5 you needed them to be working the fields, that human life is not as valuable from a utilitarian perspective. I think, not a utilitarian, but from some kind of perspective, dare I say, even a spiritual perspective, as a child that was really allowed to grow to the full capacity and potential of what a child is able to do.
The child was valuable, but the child was not treasured. I think there's a different thing, or valued, right?
They
Because
had
they were actually more useful than a post-scarcity human is going to be, because we don't need the post-scarcity human. We needed the pre-scarcity human to do the work. But I see what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm imagining is going to happen is that having children and reproducing and living life is going to be similar to the way that we imagine like organic gardening at the moment. You can grow some basil, you can grow some tomatoes. You don't need to. The planet's not going to starve without it. We've got artificial intelligence in agriculture right now that's picking fruit autonomously 24 hours a day. It doesn't ever need to sleep or be fed or anything like that. Food is not going to be a concern in the future. It's not even a concern now. It may be distribution of it, but this is not the danger that we have. So what I'm thinking is that we can actually focus on having children for the pleasure of having children, which comes back to my greater value, which is human happiness. So I most welcome. Tell me why.
Yeah, so
I
really want to. So you could be right with AI. So with AI, right? Like we could hypothesize that the way economic models work. So for about the past 200 years or so, productivity per worker in the developed world has grown about linearly, even though technology has been growing exponentially. Could AI change this? Yes, AI might change this. But even if AI does change this, it's likely to have the effects of general increased productivity that we would expect. What we often say about AI is the tool that finally frees the bourgeoisie from needing to care about the proletariat. A tool that makes the vast majority of the population, like whenever we've seen changes in society where society became more democratic, it was typically because the wealthy elite in society needed the poor more. So like in Athens, it was because they needed the triremes, which needed large amounts of poor workers to police the travel passages that the wealthy needed to trade. And when the Magna Carta was signed, that was right after the Black Death, where they had just lost a huge amount of the poor population, which again gave the lower classes more negotiating power. We are going to see like the biggest reverse in human history against that. So while we might see more wealth among the ultra elite, if they care for the poor, it will be out of a sense of charity and likely come with strings. I just don't know if it's like the general, like, oh, we can just increase taxes. Because one of the problems with like the way that AI is increasing productivity is it is very much like not locked to a country. So if one country tries to like increase taxes, well, then you can just move to one of these sovereign state sort of things where you're not going to have the same taxes and you can just collate wealth, and then you end up with techno-feudalism. People have called us techno-feudalists before, and I'm like, well, we're only techno-feudalists insofar as I think that that's where the global economy is going, not that I think it's a good thing that it's going in that direction. But none of this is really tied to pronatalism. Like if we enter one of these futures, but keep in mind, we have to predict that the global economy is going to change in a way that no technology in history has ever changed it. But like if we make the prediction, but it will, because I think that there is a very like likely reason to say, yeah, but AI will do that. You can create simulated humans with it. But even in that future, you now have the secondary problem, which is to say, if it turns out that things that I value, like women's rights, freedom, technological productivity, free thought, if it turns out that like this larger value set is incompatible with above reproduction fertility rates, but other value sets, i.e. restricting women's rights, stuff like that, is compatible with above repopulation fertility rates, then people who have this value set will make up less and less of the Earth's population going forward. What you can say is like the pronatalist movement is very much based around the idea of can we get any group out there in the world today who is economically productive, or any collection of groups, pluralistic, believes in equal rights for people, believes in freedom, to be above repopulation rate in an economically prosperous environment. Because right now, like that is an open question. Like we civilizationally don't have an answer to that question. It may turn out that this value proposition that I think is a fundamentally good value proposition is just incompatible with human flourishing.
Okay, being completely upfront, I didn't follow all of that. Then that's my fault. I'm listening as closely as I can, but I guess
sorry,
I'm just not smart enough to understand all of that.
I can give a slightly simpler response. That's not exactly Malcolm's response, but it's using all of Malcolm's arguments, because I'm basically like an AI that summarizes his points in a simpler way. One, the future that you are describing is probably what we're going to end up with. The question is, how much suffering is going to happen in between? And we're trying to minimize the suffering in between. We do think that AI could be the deus ex machina that we want it to be. And at least, especially I personally am not a carbon fascist at all. I am super excited about AI, and we don't need that many humans, whatever, like it's going to be great. So that we're looking at is the transition, and that again is what pronatalism is about, is how do we transition from a human capital dependent governance and economy system, and how do we shift to a system in which humans are not the means of production, essentially. And that is the key thing. I think that more or less addresses your question.
Okay, so the answer that I would give to that is that we increase the value that we place on human life. And I think that we are already doing that. There's very, very positive signs. So it makes it harder and harder to dismiss the poor, I suppose, as per one of your concerns, when we've got an increased awareness of the dignity of every single human life and their awareness. And as psychology becomes more accessible and people become aware of what happens in childhood, the way that it affects adults, then we start to alter parenting methods. The children should be seen, not heard. That's no longer the case. We've got anti-work, pro-union movements resurging, bringing awareness to human factory workers. If you look at war history, you see that it's no longer on this date, this happened and this general did this. You're often hearing about the soldier's perspective. Like in all areas, we're seeing a very positive individualistic trend where we're focusing on the inherent dignity of a particular human. So as per your concerns about like Athens and other societies where the rich do not need the poor, and so therefore they're able to dismiss them. It's a point well taken. I don't disagree. So this is not an or, this is an and. And what we're seeing now, though, I think is an era where an awareness of human dignity means that it's a lot more difficult to put that aside. And you see an overall decrease in like global conflicts that the last couple of years haven't necessarily proved that to be true.
But
that's the thing. I think this awareness can backfire in many ways and is often misguided in ways that can cause huge amounts of damage. Like think about what has happened to South Africa over time. Since a very empathy and human rights-based movement that was very legitimate and really trying to do good things has been fully implemented. See how that has played out. And we actually think that the future that we expect to see, this techno-feudalism, is kind of, it's not Mad Max. It's South Africa. It's going to play out in this way where infrastructure is crumbling, but then there's going to be these wealthy gated communities that have what they need. And they're not going to bother paying for or taking care of other groups outside them because those groups become so antagonistic. And frankly, go ahead, Malcolm.
Well, and I want to say that you say all of this, like you're talking about this trend that we see in media to more personally driven narratives and everything like that. And the hypothesis is this will drive more compassion among the economic elite to not be so monopolistic in their wealth. And yet at the same time as we've seen this trend, we've seen the trend of the ultra wealthy getting more and more ultra wealthy when contrasted with the rest of the population at like an accelerating pace. Like we're already seeing this in the economic data of like the rich breaking out and continuing to get richer while the quality of life of the rest of society isn't increasing.
But the rich, the ultra wealthy have increasingly moved left in their politics and favored systems of governments that favor more distribution of wealth. Like the systems that we have in place now are democratic as opposed to the monarchies or tyrannies of ages past. So it doesn't necessarily matter in my mind, I suppose, what, you know, a few miserly tyrant rich people might think. What's going to stop them from simply getting voted for higher and higher taxes to steal that wealth from the population of people? Like the power of the people to share information, to organize, is never been higher. The wealthy do not have the control of society that they used to back in feudal times, nor do I really even sense the appetite to express that. If anything, the ultra rich kind of have a sort of self-hating flagellism that seems to be going on. I don't.
But the taxation.
Think, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I just want to point out that the taxation methods you're suggesting. I mean, this has happened in the past where it's like, oh, let's have a high corporate tax here. Let's do this. This is the right thing to do. And I'm not saying it's not. Corporations have an amazing ability to build shell companies and offshore to, you know, Ireland and all these other places where there are tax havens. So what you're doing is creating evolutionary pressures for organizations that will force them out of ecosystems that currently they may be financially supporting and actually totally bottoming out the tax revenue that those areas used to get by scaring them away. You're going to get, you know, capital flight. And that's not something we want to see either. So this is one of those like, oh, it's such a wicked problem. And I do believe, and here's the thing, it's not even that I think that the populaces of various countries are going to successfully force companies into paying a ton of money. I think ultimately what's going to happen is the people running these companies, and we're going to have increasingly small numbers of people running them because of AI, are just going to be good people. And like you, they're going to care about happiness. They're going to care about other people, and they're going to use their money and their resources to create things like UBI and to provide these services. Well, but I also think that to a certain extent, and this is something we haven't even begun to address, there are going to be so few people in the future because of things like AI, which then create your AI girlfriend and your AI children and your AI life. And suddenly there's no need to even exist at all as a human. You're kind of a brain in a vat experiencing a virtual world where you're living a virtual life. That in the future, the humans that actually exist are going to be humans that opt out of those systems, that aren't part of this UBI, that aren't part of this sort of like pleasure dome that is created by those who create supportive UBI social services for the unworking populace. The future will only be inhabited by those who opt out of that support and continue to build things and maintain their own level of sovereignty. So what makes me a little bit afraid is the social support systems that you're describing are creating not only self-extinguishing humans, but humans that are completely absent of any form of influence over the future. I mean, maybe they'll have influence over their own little, you know, social sets and, you know, they'll be trading in social capital, like in so many sci-fi books, you know, of a post-scarcity world where then everything you trade on is based on social capital, which I totally see happening. It's kind of, I mean, oh God, that was a tick. Shit, how did a tick get on me?
I guess you guys live in the woods.
You see that?
Yeah. Careful for Lyme disease.
Okay,
that is,
Simone, were you done? Can I pick up here?
Yeah, too.
Well, okay, I was going to say that I think a lot of this self-flagellization is performative, not necessarily performative for the poor in society, but performative so that they can continue to feel like they're good people. And if you look historically, if you look at something like the feudal period, the wealthy actually could be more taxed by the poor or by the government to support the poor because they generated their wealth off of humans and off of the land. So they needed to like sort of stay in a region and you could keep them there. As wealth is increasingly divorced from human capital and physical capital, like the land, it makes it much easier for the wealthy to Simone's reaction to this tick.
I'm trying to kill it, but it's
much
not
easier to
dying.
get capital flight.
It's a metaphor for the system that won't adapt.
Yeah.
So here's what I'd say. I don't totally understand the point that you made, Simone, with regards to you feel like people getting hooked up to these systems of welfare or UBI or something like that might potentially just get bred out of existence. I probably see it the opposite, in that freeing them from that, like one of the main reasons, I suppose, for people not having children is because of their need to work to provide themselves. They can't economically afford it. Once you free them from that, then they actually have the opportunity to indulge in, you know, pleasure activities like having a family, creative pursuits, intellectual challenges, things like that.
I can summarize her point really quickly here in a different way. She's sort of saying
Thanks.
that once people can, if you are having kids because they are giving you pleasure, you can probably get that same pleasure from living in a virtual environment with simulated children. But these are perfect children.
You can't
And
possibly
simulated
agree with
children you
that,
can turn
Simone,
off whenever it's
surely.
inconvenient. No, 100%. Well,
Look at people dating
for
AI
example,
women. Like, why?
Yeah.
Sorry.
We as people who are prominent in the prenatalist movement, constantly have people reaching out to us. You know, I want to create a family. I really want to do this. The problem is that right now our societal standards are so out of whack and our dating systems are so out of whack. All these systems don't work. And also they're completely unrealistic expectations around what it means to have a partner now and what it means to have kids. That I think even in a post-scarcity world, having kids is going to be relatively rare. And I mean, you even see this in sci-fi. Who's having tons of kids in sci-fi? Where's the family of 7 in sci-fi? It's like maybe they have a kid every now and then.
Because sci-fi is written by hyper logical nerd dudes who have no capacity.
Not really. I mean, look at sci-fi from the 30s. Look at Brave New World. So much of what's described there is, to me, like, whoa, like a lot of this is happening right now, you know, like this concept of soma, these scented showers, the kind of culture that people live in. I feel like sci-fi can be very predictive of life. And what's cool about sci-fi is you have these, hyper rational, very smart people, but who are trying to sort of model, like, what do you do? What do you get when you combine humanity with what we expect to be the development of future technology, of sort of the logical conclusion of these combinations? I mean, I don't think it's completely off base.
Can I jump in and provide a larger summary of this? Because I actually think all of this relates to the thing we spoke about over an hour ago about the awareness of humanity as opposed to just the logic, because I cannot relate. This is the most outlandish thing that I think I've heard from you guys so far, is the idea that people are not going to be able to meaningfully tell the difference between raising flesh and blood children and having an AI experience of it or something else like that. That's completely nonsensical to me. I could not disagree more. And I want to explain to you my reasons why.
Okay.
You can already see that there is a movement, even based on, like, we'll look back from the future, the small amount of technology and artificial intelligence in our lives, and already see people rejecting it, not wanting to do it. People picking up typewriters because they like the feeling of it. People going off social media. The fact that everybody is watching lifestyle content, that people growing organic vegetables in the woods, perhaps living in places similar to you, gets millions of views. Yet when Mark Zuckerberg shows the latest AI headset thing, everybody clowns on it, makes fun of it. We're fucking sick of that. We don't want it. We want something real. And I'm curious as to why you guys don't see this, is that maybe there's a part of your own humanity that you're not in touch with. But I'm telling you, people don't want artificial children. It's fucking weird. It's fucking creepy. If anything, people are already saturated with this shit and they want something real. They want connection. They want friendships. We don't know how to do it. We've got a practical issue, but I'm telling you, the market, the hunger is absolutely there. It's already peaked as far as I'm concerned. The role that I see robotics and AI playing is not that we're all going to be plugged into computer games 24 hours a day. Yeah, there'll be some people, they'll be bred out of the gene pool. that's probably inevitable, but for the most part, people are going to be like free to be what humans are meant to be, while humanity takes while robotics and stuff takes care of all the crap that we don't want to
Yeah.
do. I'm so certain of that.
So I should clarify this here. Where a group doesn't need to have no kids to disappear. A group to disappear just needs to be significantly below repopulation rate. And this is the problem with ideological systems that are motivated by the pursuit of pleasure, because you can typically get a great amount of pleasure from one child. You can get incrementally more pleasure, perhaps, from 2 children, but you're not getting a ton more pleasure when you go to 4 or 5 kids. The problem is that the systems that are motivated by pleasure, like right now, given that only 45% of women of this young generation want to have kids, that means that they need to be having over 4 kids each for that population group to stay stable. And that's just not a behavioral pattern that's motivated by pleasure, especially when there's alternatives. Now, to the second point you made about people never choosing like artificial children, I think that, yes, artificial children is less than real children in terms of what you can get from it. And I do see this movement of rejection, which I think is a good thing. But I think that this movement is facing the wall of just how broken aspects of our existing culture are, like the current dating markets. Like when I hear the stories about young men trying to date in today's environment, or young women trying to date, I think it's like logarithmically harder than it was for our generation. And that, well, to our generation, like an AI girlfriend or boyfriend might seem absurd. To them, they're like, yeah, but you don't know what the alternative is for me. So I think that you're right, and hopefully we do see some cultural correction. But I also still have fear that we're going to get enough pressure that these groups will cease to exist in the future.
I would also argue that, yes, the market demand is there, but it's being exercised. So people are looking at trad wife stuff. They're looking at homesteading. They're looking at people making meals out in the woods. They're doing all this without any inconvenience. They're doing all this without seeing all the other stuff that goes into creating that. And they themselves are not going to bother doing it. And a lot of this just comes down to it's the equivalent of corn, and it's often called corn. It is exercising the feeling of doing it without actually doing it in a non-productive way. And that can often be enough for people. And I think that we just need to be aware of the fact that when we actually talk with people, even who are openly pronatalist, who actively want to like find a partner, have a kid. And, we once did a matchmaking thing where like we had this extensive screening and like, what are you looking for? And, we would then send like, well, here are like 5 people that might be a good fit with you. And they're like, nah, like I'm looking for, it'd be like a guy in his like mid to late 30s. Oh, I'm looking for a girl in her 20s who like fits A, B, and C. People aren't really willing to put in work anymore. And a lot of that is because of what we're being exposed to online. And a lot of this comes back to culture, which is why culture matters, right? Because if you don't have a culture that's like, suck it up, you're going to have to raise each other as a couple. You're going to have someone who's like, oh, well, why can't I just get a partner who's perfect out of the box? And they don't exist, but they're just going to have that expectation due to what we're exposed to on social media and online, because that is what sells algorithmically. So again, these systems that exist, that sell well, that spread well online, that spread well economically, are not in the best interest of humans. This is why you need a culture that overrides them, that says, sorry, you're going to have to do the hard thing. Or that you build that for yourself. And there are cultures online that do that too. There's like, all these sort of, men's self-improvement groups, that are like, sorry, you got to like get offline, you got to lift, you got to eat well, you got to go clean, like all these things. And that's culture. Okay. So I'm just like, but again, this is such a hard thing to do when you're coming from no cultural background and when you're doing it all yourself, that the number of people who are going to figure that out is so small, that without any significant movement to try to feed into this and cultivate it, which we're trying to feed, which we're trying to raise awareness about, you're not going to get the kind of human flourishing in response to all of this, even in a post-scarcity society that is perfect and everyone's taken care of, where you're going to see flourishing humans in the future.
And I want to talk about men's groups really quickly, because I think it's an interesting phenomenon we've seen recently, where due to sort of the cultural vacuum that we're in, we are seeing cultural ideological systems emerge, which people see as preferable to the vacuum, but that are actually very primitive, where they're almost like we sort of divide most ethical systems into consequentialist, deontological, and aesthetics-based. And an aesthetics-based framework is what these are, where I have heard these masculine influencers, like Hamza did this one video, when he was making a major life life decision, ask himself, what is the most masculine decision I could make in this moment? You know, and that's the decision he made. Like his ethical system was based around the aesthetic of masculinity, which is like below even like deontological systems to me. And it leads to like what I think we actually see this on the far left as well. I think aspects of the trans movement have been co-opted where like they now are engaging with the entire world through their gender identity instead of you know, appealing to larger ethical frameworks. And we've seen this on both the left and the right. I don't know why gender has become like this big thing for our generation, but I think that that's why. It's because it's like an aesthetic framework for making big decisions and individual decisions that scratches some sort of aesthetic itch which isn't being scratched by our society anymore.
Okay, so then I'm going to try and summarize it where I imagine you might. Do you look at me and where I'm coming from and think some variation of, oh, bless him, he's quite naive. He has an unjustifiable optimism in human capacity and individualism that algorithms and technology are going to suck more humans than he is aware of into this vortex, and then we're going to be fucked. That's why you need tribalistic thinking patterns that are at least more positively oriented, like that you're calling cultures, in order to safeguard against that, and that it's too ivory tower, his version of individualism, to actually be a meaningful opposing force to the sheer efforts of that. I'm looking at the camera, but I'm seeing you guys shake your heads, and I'm surprised. I'd like to hear why, because I'm like, I was certain that's basically how I feel like that's a decent summary of where I'm coming from.
Hypothesis for how reality is going to play out than we have, and it's based on likely a different set of evidence and experiences. But you don't seem to be any less intelligent than us. So I just see these as competing hypotheses about how to deal with the world that we live in.
Yeah, my thinking
then.
My thinking is just like, yeah, he's smart. He's very empathetic, and I really, really hope he's right, because if you're right and we're super wrong about how things are going to play out, things are going to go so much better. Like the future that we think that we're modeling out, it's not, it's dirty, it's violent, it's scary. A lot of people get hurt. I don't want that to happen. I'm really afraid of that happening. And what you're saying is that we don't need as violent of an intervention, essentially. We don't need to take on these hard cultures. We don't need to shore up for this really tough period in order to make it through to this next stage of human flourishing. And I really fucking hope that's right. And I'm glad that you're taking that approach. And we have this weird hardline approach because we're kind of like, we're the dude, the crazy dude with a ton of guns in the zombie apocalypse movie, and like everyone else like wasn't ready, and this dude was like, I was ready. This is it. This is my moment.
So waiting. Like so many people are waiting for that apocalypse so that they can,
But we take the pleasure. We don't want the zombie apocalypse, but we, you know, like if it comes, we'll be like, yeah. But like, no, I'd prefer.
But hold on, I would add a separate thing here. Like, suppose we live in a world where there's some percent probability that we're right about how things play out, and there's some percent probability that you're right about how things play out. And I think that that's the world we live in. Now, where those percentages are, I think that that's something that different people could debate on. But I basically don't need to worry about things playing out if you're right. Because if you're right, nothing really matters. No preparation matters because everything ends up fine anyway. So I guess I don't consider your world perspective as strongly because I'm like, oh, great world perspective. If he's right, then I don't need to do anything to prepare for that.
Well, and that's how it is in the zombie apocalypse movies, right? Like the normal cool people, like the protagonists, are just they're kind of glad that the gun nut is there and that they can use some of his guns, but like he's not necessary.
So we'll check in like 20 years. We'll do this interview again, and I'll be like, "Oh man, I'm so glad you guys existed." I think that was a very generous and very, very nice way that you summed it up, and probably accurate. I think I'm just having one of those moments where I'm like, sometimes you don't see reality correctly because you don't really want to believe it. You don't want to see it. You don't want to face like the hard truths. There's a fear, I suppose, about a violent kind of culture versus culture, Mad Max, whatever kind of dystopian future that you guys could potentially be trying to prevent against. I'm worried that I have that blind spot with regards to my own optimism. But at the same time, I'll just explain, because if I had to put a percentage on it, I'd think, yeah, maybe 20-25%. Like, you guys could be right. I give the rest to me.
Those are huge odds. I would say it's maybe more like 10-15%. Like, we're with you, maybe even a little bit more optimistic about the future.
Okay.
But like, so we had a similar reaction with the bat rabies issue that we alluded to earlier, where we're like, you know, even if this bat was rabid, even if this bat, you know, like bit, you know, our dog, the professor or something, like, you know, the odds that she, you know, becomes infected are so low because she was vaccinated and boosted after that and everything. But like, rabies is deadly. If you get it, you die.
Sure.
You know, so it's one of those things where when governments look at problems like these, they multiply the gravity of the damage by the likelihood of it happening. So if the likelihood is 0.00001, but 10 million people die, then they make this calculus. Okay, we're still going to put, you know, $500 million towards some kind of plan for this. Because when you consider the value of a human life, which governments have various like amounts for, then you have to, it's worth investing in it. So what we're only doing here is we're multiplying the likelihood of this scenario by the gravity of this scenario and reacting according to our internal calculus, which is all super fudged and weird.
And the negative externalities from our approach, because we've got to look to see, could our approach have negative externalities in environments where this scenario doesn't play out? This way of thinking about the problem is actually very similar to the way we see AI apocalypticism, where, you know, we have a very, like, I think, antagonistic view to perspectives like Eliezer Yudkowsky's perspective, right? Because sort of we're like, if we live in his world and it's possible, like
I don't know who this person is. Do I need to know? Or
he's an AI apocalypticist. Not really. Basically, that's all you need to know.
There's people who think that AI is going to kill all humans in the next few years. Okay. And we think that this is something that could happen if utility convergence isn't a thing. But if utility convergence isn't a thing, if it turns out that AIs don't end up converging on utility functions, we don't need to get into this, then AI eventually kills us in every timeline, whether it's 10 years from now or 500 years from now. And so I basically don't need to consider any of those timelines. So that's sort of the way that we approach big types of decision making. And then people are like, well, we could get every government in the world to collude and prevent AI from developing past its current level. And I'm like, but obviously that won't happen. And they're like, yeah, but we could try and we could mount this big campaign. And I'm like, no, it's not worth thinking about because it won't happen.
So
it's very similar.
Yeah. Therein lies, I suppose, though, that's where I feel like there's some kinship, but there's a divergence here in that I assume that you guys are probably both temperamentally reasonably well suited to be able to handle the level of concern that you've got over your future. For me, with my kind of mind, I'm a little bit more like, if I've made my judgment that this is the most likely, it's not very good for my personal well-being to sit with that as an awareness. It eats away at me. I think I'm too sensitive of a soul. I can't just go, oh, that's interesting data. It would affect me kind of at an emotional level. I'd like to think that I am rational enough that if I genuinely did believe it and I was convinced, I would align myself. But it's very difficult to say with any certainty that I have that level of self-awareness and that I'm not backwards rationalizing my emotions. This is my best guess at the moment, but I appreciate you guys are coming from someplace different. And I also appreciate you doing the work that you do to raise the alarm as well as you do, because at the very least, we got to talk about it. We got to argue about it. We need to contend with this. And you guys seem like good spokespeople for this particular idea. You don't seem irrational or guided by an ulterior motive, at least in the hour or so that I've been chatting to you. So I'm pleased that whatever debate comes from this is probably going to be quite clean. So thank you for your contribution to the public discourse. I appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. And one really interesting thing is, since we sort of came to prominence, and we always go viral for something negative, like nobody goes viral for something positive, or almost nobody does. Like, you have to tie the positive message to something that's going to go viral. But oh yeah, it's that since we have sort of become the spokespeople of this movement, the racists who were using this movement to promote their own agendas, because there were racists who were trying to use fertility decline to promote racialized agendas, have mostly lost all of their steam. Like, they are just not in the public anymore. And a lot of people who used to associate with us, like people are like, why do racists come to your conference? And they're like, no, former racists like come to people who we are deconverting from these ideas, because for a long time, people were able to use this very obvious statistical trend, rapidly declining fertility rates, and the press not talking about it, to then say, well, the press doesn't talk about this, therefore, here are all these other things I'm able to incept you as using this fact to incept people with nationalistic and racially motivated ideas.
Sexism
And
too, but I'll talk about that in a moment.
yeah, well, and sexist ideas as
Oh,
well. And as this
yeah.
movement has grown, it's deflated a lot of their ability to do that. And a lot of the racists who used to use this have just sort of disappeared from public discord. Like, you know, when was the last time anyone saw like Nick Fuentes talk, for example? Like, it's
Don't know who that
really
is.
interesting to me.
I'm not keeping up with a lot of this stuff. Sorry, I feel dumb, but I don't know many of these names that you're talking about. But I've certainly seen people use the population decline and declining fertility rates as an excuse to start curtailing the rights of women. And that
Yeah.
shits me to no end. And like,
Same.
I've seen it pop up in the comment section of my channel probably years ago before I really established and clarified my audience. But yeah, that really, really annoyed me. And I think that I probably, just to admit some bias, that might have also contributed a little bit to some of the resistance that I felt towards you guys and your message, knowing that that's that thing that was used for that sexist idea way back when. And possibly some of the resistance that you guys are facing now might be from people who experience genuine racism and that was cloaked in these ideas. And if
Totally.
if you can just steel yourselves with enough courage and fortitude to wait out the storm, it might take a moment for these guys to see through their own emotional response to actually listen to the substance of what you guys are talking about without them projecting all the old stuff that kind of came with it. So that's a thankless chore, I guess, for you guys. I hope you enjoy what you're doing and you get some personal pleasure out of it, because I certainly wouldn't want to be in your position and have shit written about me on The Guardian or whatever. That sounds like a fucking nightmare.
Yeah, I'm
Well,
not
I mean,
looking
keep in
forward
mind,
to
we
Child
are,
Protective Services coming to our house today, but we got a nice basket of eggs for her, so hopefully she thinks we don't
but
hate
also
her.
keep in mind, we're
Bribing a
delusional. Like,
public official. Oh, she admits
I
it.
mean,
Oh gosh,
we give eggs to everyone who
we
comes.
think
It is equal
we
opportunity.
think we genuinely believe we're trying to save the world. So like, it's really exciting. As Simone often says to me, the only true happiness you will ever experience in life is efficaciously living a well thought out value system. Like achieving the things for
Ooh, I
your
like that.
value system always provides this truer happiness than you can get from any sort
Yeah.
of, you know, in the moment masturbation of these emotional pathways. And I really appreciated that insight, Simone, because I think that in our lives, I experience, you know, being married to you and working on this project with you, like more genuine happiness than I ever thought could be possible. Because I think, you know, not only am I efficaciously living my value system, but we are incrementally succeeding. Like, have we fixed everything yet? No. But every day we're getting further with our message than the last. And we have done a good job of bringing this into the public consciousness, I think. Like, it is a mainstream issue now that most people have to be aware of. The thing that scares us the most about all of this, and I can tell you this is something I've really noticed, it's freaking me out, is some people, now that they know that like there might be this ethical issue around not having enough kids and they don't have enough kids and they need to square that perspective with themselves, the way that they do it is they're like, well, so bad people don't have enough kids, I am not a bad people, therefore the antinatalists must be the good guys. And they develop this anti-natalist moral system that justifies, you know, this cognitive dissonance they're feeling. And they begin to believe that humanity is actually a bad thing, that humanity needs to be erased. And I've actually heard this, you know, when I'm in like deep in what we call the urban monoculture, like at a party in New York with a bunch of like rich people, I'll be like, hey, you know, humanity might be going extinct at these fertility rates. We'd be considered an endangered species in these countries. And they're like, hey, is it really that bad if humanity goes extinct? And like, this should be like a dropping thing for someone to say, like in a historic context, people would be like, whoa, you're in like some insane death cult. And I think that historically, when there were groups in conflict, you know, the song, at least the Russians love their, or I hope the Russians love their children too, there was always this hypothesis that while we had these big conflicts over the best way for humanity to have a future, we all believed in the good of humanity and that, you know, a future should exist. But this is just an ideological conflict. But now there is a group that is rising in opposition to the pronatalist movement that genuinely wants humanity extinct. And this is a threat unlike anything humanity has ever faced before. And it does scare me.
And I want to be clear, you do not need to have kids to be pronatalist. You do not have to like kids to be pronatalist. Honestly, you just need to like not step on the necks of people who want to have a lot of kids from a regulatory policy or like lifestyle perspective. That's it. So you don't, if you don't have kids, you don't have like kids, that's great. And in fact, you should be all the more supportive of those who do want to have kids and who support the choice to not have kids, because that's how you can make sure that future people who are like you have the rights to do what you do. But it's not like there is some bifurcation between, okay, well, if you're not keen to have kids yourself, or if you don't or can't have kids, that you're suddenly, well, I guess I have to be antinatalist. I just want to point that out.
Okay, I think that's reasonably clear. Should we leave things there?
Yeah,
I don't know. This has been a lot of fun talking with you. I've really enjoyed this video. Individuals from this video, they're like one of our podcasts to check out. That would be probably a pretty good going off point would be the one we did on levels of thinking, where we talk about different ethical systems and why we have chosen the ethical system that we've chosen. But
Like,
yeah,
what, if they
I
like
found
search
this
on
really
YouTube
enriching.
Based Camp and Levels of Thinking, they'll find it.
Based Camp.
I think so.
Based Camp is our podcast. It's basically our dates now. We just record podcasts together from separate rooms.
Yeah,
we're weird.
It's so nice.
Yeah, it's fun.
I get to intellectually engage with the person I love. Like, what could be more thrilling than that?
It's fun.
I will say, I think your cause is fascinating. I'm glad we got a chance to talk about it. I'm now, I got to say, my curiosity has been whetted, and my appetite is not yet satiated with regards to you two as a couple and as individuals. It sounds like you have interesting opinions on a number of different topics. And I always enjoy sharpening my mind against somebody else who has a well thought out perspective. And I imagine there's going to be some similarities, but I'm more interested in the divergences. So what I would be interested in is, if I come into the United States at some point, do you accept visitors? Could I come hang out for a couple of days?
We have a guest room. We'd love to have you at our 1700s farmhouse. All
your daughter's super,
and
we have all the diapers, all the kid toys. We have little bumper cars. She'll love it here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Definitely stop by.
We're also organizing for when kids are a bit older, trades with our kids with some other people who are living in different environments for periods to do a sending out so they can learn what it's like to live in a totally different value system and environment.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
During their teenage years. So let us
hit
us up
you
for
get to
that.
apprentice with another family.
Which state are you in?
We're in Pennsylvania. So we're 2 hours from New York. We're 2.5 from DC, and we're 30 minutes from Philadelphia in Valley Forge. So we're a really great place if you're coming to visit and you want to, like, you know, see all these places while still having a place to stay at night that's free. You can just borrow our car and drive out to those cities.
I've got no interest in cities. I'm a country kid, and what I know about Pennsylvania is that the hiking paths are really rocky under feet. Like, is that true? Like, it's very difficult.
Oh well, we're right by like hundreds of miles of paved biking trails, so you don't have to worry about that.
Okay, very. Is it deciduous trees or is it all pine forest there?
A mix.
Deciduous.
We're actually in a temperate rainforest, so
me too. I love rainforest. Yeah, I live in a treehouse.
No, oh, you do. That's amazing.
Yeah. So no, I think. Oh God, I love weird people. Like, I think I might be a bit of a weird person, but you guys seem weird to me. I think that I could enjoy cross-pollinating my weirdness with your weirdness for a period.
We are in favor of this. You better let us know when you're coming through.
Actually, if we're fighting for anything, it's a future where weird people can exist, where weirdness is defined by cultural distance from the dominant cultural group. You know, we are super, super weird. Oh, and you'd love. We've got a little creek by our house, and then right next to us we have a river where we can just go out and put on inner tubes with little motors and zoom around. And
gorgeous!
It's nice.
Oh man. Yeah, the interior of America is definitely a place I want to do more exploring. I want to start kind of at southern Appalachia and then just go right up through the Great Smoky Mountains and all the way up there and finish like in Maine. You know, I want to see all the little towns and experience all of that. That's like big,
amazing.
big next item for me. It's quite different from
Yeah.
Australia. We live by the coast, and our beaches are
Oh,
world
okay.
class. There's nothing that
Yeah.
could compete with the beaches, especially here in Western Australia, in my opinion. But
No,
you
true.
drive 100 kilometers inland, basically anywhere, and it's desert. You know, it's very little. The fact that your country is like got beautiful forests and like lakes and rivers and stuff like that so far from the coast is so difficult for me as an Australian to really understand. But I spent 6 months in Tennessee, and it blew my mind. Like, I
Oh.
was like, this is a climate unlike anything I've ever experienced before. And I didn't, I was only 17. I wanted to taste more. I wanted to
Oh,
explore on my
man.
own.
Oh,
Yeah.
we'll give you different times a year. One time a year you could come to our house is when you get all the fireflies, because we're also
That's now.
fireflies everywhere in the field outside our house. Or a different
Yeah.
time of year you could come during harvest season. So we grow tons of raspberries and strawberries and apples and peaches and
Well, autumn
pears on
here
our
is so
property.
gorgeous. All the trees changing color.
You
Yeah.
guys are like
Yeah.
Amish, you're like growing your own
We got
food.
chickens.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We'll give you all
Our
our own
prized
eggs.
chickens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
It's
this is
not
what
often
people like. They're
people
like,
living that lifestyle are also like. Plus, you know, after I brought in my chickens, I noticed I was trending on Twitter. Like those two things
Yeah,
don't
and
go.
like we have like our house has like all these AI agents within it, so our kids are constantly
have
like talking to the like
little
you know,
AI
systems
toys
in
that
our
the
house.
kids can talk to that can reply to them. The Grok toy, I love it.
Yeah.
But also I love people. They're like trad is a LARP. Like I've heard this, like live action role play. If you've heard of this, you know, they're like it's an act, and I'm like all cultures are an act. Like every when a Hasidic Jew wakes up and decides to live by their cultural standards, they're LARPing, but that LARPing changes your mindset and the way you relate to the world. So Simone and I, our whole, pilgrim lifestyle, which people are like, you live like
I'm like literally wearing
secular
like a
Puritan
corset.
extremists. They're like, our whole pilgrim lifestyle is a LARP, but it changes our mindset into, I think, one that's much more like wholesome and sort of filters all the emotions that we are experiencing through a lens, which makes the experience more, I guess, positive and clean feeling to me.
Oh, man. Not only do I want to hang out with you, I want my partner to hang out with you because I want to get her opinion on you guys very much. And I want to know how you two strange souls managed to find each other. There's a lot to discuss, but out of respect for
God.
our audience,
that's a
we won't
wild
open up
story.
new threads right now.
Yeah, watch
Yeah.
out for that one.
Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end, guys. I appreciate it. Go check out the Based Camp. There's stuff if you want to hear more from these guys. Thank you for indulging. All right. See you, everybody.
Spectacular.